how do you think the Japanese companies are adapting AI? Do you think they're adapting it well, or what's your impression?
What I really like is Japanese companies are not blindly rushing into implementing this. They're not falling for the, oh my God, everybody else is doing it. Okay. We should quickly do something with it. I would say Japan is perhaps half a step behind on that journey, but that's not a bad thing, like I say. We can totally allow somebody else to make the mistakes, learn quickly, and be quick followers. You want to create an app, you want to create your own AI model, very cool. That's not how you make money.
Okay.
That's not. So yeah, if you're OpenAI, if you're Google, yeah, go ahead, for sure, do it, right? Most of us are not Google or Amazon or Facebook. Most of us are regular companies. You're trying to figure it out.
We have to admit it. Yes.
Do the boring things right. Do it the old-fashioned way.
はい、ピボットの竹下です。ピボットグローバル始まります。今日はですね、世界的なビジネススクールの IMD という、スイスとかに拠点がある、ビジネススクールがあるんですが、そこから、アミットジョシ教授に来てもらってます。アミットさんはですね、これポッドキャストとかいろいろと、ペーパー出して本当に面白いんですけど、AI が専門家で、AI が実際どう世界の会社、企業に使われるのかを、本当に詳しい方なので、日本の会社にとってもたくさんのヒントがあると思いますので、早速、話を聞いていきたいと思います。So Professor Amit Joshi, welcome to PIVOT.Thank
you very much. It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
It's good to have you. So you are a professor at IMD. Could you quickly introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure. So I'm a professor of AI analytics and marketing strategy at IMD. And IMD, if your viewers don't know, we are a Swiss institution. We are a business school, but we are a very, very special kind of a business school. We have a relatively small MBA and executive MBA program.Both of these have about 100 and 150 people respectively. But what we mainly do is executive education. And in that, we've been top in the world for the last 15 or 20 years.
Right.
We work with close to 15,000 executives, senior executives from around the world every year. And when I say around the world, I literally mean all the way from the United States, where we have a relatively small presence, to Europe, Africa, obviously Asia, where we have a significantly higher presence.So it's a very exciting organization.
Wow. So you attract top-tier business leaders from all over the world.
We are very, very lucky that we do get to interact with very senior business leaders from all over the world, across industries, across geographies, all of those things. Indeed, yes.
Great. So today we'll be talking about AI. And I'll break it down to 3 topics. First topic, we'll ask you what's your take on AI.For the second part, this will be the main part of our discussion, how Japanese companies can adapt AI, because you know a lot of examples from the United States and also from Europe. And for the final part, we want to discuss the risk and future of AI. So for the first part, so we've been discussing ChatGPT for a couple of months, and some people are kind of not bored, but tired of listening to stories about AI. Do you think, there's like a hype cycle in every technology. Do you think it has reached a peak and coming down? Some people think it's the winter of AI. What's your take on AI so far?
You're right. I mean, you cannot, unless you're living under a rock or something, you cannot escape ChatGPT and Gen AI today. Right. I do think it is quite overhyped even at this point. It's starting to kind of dissipate just a little bit, but we are definitely close to the peak of the hype cycle in the Gartner life cycle. And we have been in that peak for several months now, right? I mean, it's an amazing technology.
Yes.
Okay, I'm not going to deny it. It truly is an amazing technology. It truly has incredible potential at the individual level, at the organization, country level, especially for countries like Japan, as we will discuss shortly. But at the same time, a lot of the conversations around it are a little too much, right? I mean, they're a little too much in the sense that, oh my God, this is going to destroy humanity. Or, oh my God,
take over our jobs.
Take over all our jobs, and we are all going to be jobless and on the street begging. And I don't see it that way. I don't see it that way. I don't see this as an existential threat that's going to, invariably when I discuss this, people talk about Skynet and Terminator. I think that's just science fiction, at least with relation to this technology. There are real risks, and I'm happy to talk about them at length. But right now, the way I see this is an amazing technology that is significantly hyped up for the moment. Hopefully the hype will die down, and then we can get into really applying this and getting value from this, because that's when we will see how we can make money with this, how we can add value with this.
Do you think there's too much saying rather than actually doing something?
There is a bit of that. There is a bit of that. Especially in the popular media, press,
Yes.
you take any of the business publications or other regular news publications, there are so many articles, especially about the extreme events related to this. It could be extreme bad thing, but then you realize it's a one-off thing where, the system made a mistake or some person used it in the wrong way. Or alternatively about some incredible thing the system did. But then if you really read the fine print, this was like a 1 in a million chance that the system actually did this. But the way it's portrayed is that, oh my God, the system is just going berserk and it's becoming human-like intelligent and this can think and this can understand. Personally, for me, the system can do none of those things, right? This is, like I said, it's an incredibly smart system. It's very, very well engineered. It's based on some really amazing computer science and mathematics breakthroughs. But it is nothing like Skynet. It is nothing like an existential threat, at least in the way it's portrayed, in my opinion.
So having that said, I think our viewers are kind of understand how ChatGPT is great or smart, but I think it's difficult to link between their business and ChatGPT because it's basically just a machine creating a bunch of sentences. So next part, I would like to ask you how Japanese companies can adapt and make use of AI for their real business. So first question, how do you think the Japanese companies are adapting AI? Do you think they're adapting it well, or what's your impression?
My impression, and I must admit, it's based on relatively limited interactions with few Japanese companies over my multiple visits to Japan. But my understanding is there is a definite eagerness, there is a definite motivation across large and medium-sized Japanese companies to implement this. What I really like is Japanese companies are not blindly rushing into implementing this. Okay? They're not falling for the, oh my God, everybody else is doing it. Okay. We should quickly do something with it. Perhaps in very typical Japanese fashion, they're doing it very, very thoughtfully. They're doing it
very Japanese.
Very Japanese.
Yes.
In this case, I think that's a good thing. That's a good thing. In some other technologies, perhaps, that may not be the best, especially when you need to move fast. In this case, it's perhaps not the worst thing that you're waiting for the technology to kind of settle, seeing what's happening around, building your plan, and then figuring out use cases and applications. And what I have seen from, like I said, large and medium companies, but also from think tanks, but also from your government and government agencies, is kind of like converging desire to make the best use of this. Can I say that the Japanese companies have figured it out? No, I'm not saying that. Right? I cannot say that for anyone. No companies, the Americans haven't figured it, the Chinese haven't figured it out, the Europeans, nobody's figured it out. Everybody's on a journey. I would say Japan is perhaps half a step behind on that journey, but that's not a bad thing, like I say. We can totally allow somebody else to make the mistakes, learn quickly, and be quick followers. So this is where I see the Japanese companies in the process of this. There are really, really interesting projects that are in place that I'm seeing that will hopefully get scaled, but they're starting off on this journey right now.
Is there time to catch up?
I think there is. I really think there is. And I'll tell you why. Because even the companies that are, let's say, really started off very, very quickly, moved very quickly, and today are, for example, further ahead. The technology itself is changing so quickly.
That's true. Yes.
Okay? That you might be number one on the basis of today's version of the technology, but by this evening, some new thing might come out.
2 or 3 hours and something.
In 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah. That's true.
It's literally happened to me that I was conducting sessions for executives. I went in at 8:30 in the morning. I said something that this can do this, this can do that. We came out at 12:30, and I checked my phone, and there was a new update, and what I had said was no longer true.
It was out of date.
It was out of date already.
That's so funny.
So this is how quickly this thing is moving, right? So I think there's definite time to catch up. To your point,
Could you give examples of other countries, like for instance, like the United States, how they're using generative AI?
Tech sector in the United States, but also the finance sector, to a certain extent pharma. In some sectors, they really have started quickly adopting this. Now, What I am seeing, not just in United States, but also largely in Europe as well as, for example, China, is that there are two big use cases for this. Okay, I would say 80, maybe even 90% of all applications I see for this technology currently are only in two categories. Category number one is what I call knowledge management.
Knowledge management. Okay.
Yeah. What do I mean by knowledge management? Well, I have a large amount of internal data, large amount of internal documentation. Can I make sense of that? Can I use this technology to make life of all my employees much easier?
What do you mean by data? The customers?
It could be customer data. It could be data about my own products and services. It could be data about installation and manufacture. So let me give you a couple of examples, right? I'm a really, really large industrial company, like Siemens or Hitachi or something like this. I install very, very complex, large machinery for my clients. I send a team of people to install this machinery, and machinery installation will have instruction books that can be hundreds of pages, right? I mean, think about it. Now, I'm installing this, and there's some special situation in my client's site. Where in these 5,000 pages do I find what do I do if there is a particular slope like this?
It's like a phone book of a bunch of phone.
Exactly.
Yes, I've seen those. Yeah.
Now I can go into Gen AI and say, hey, look, this is the situation. This. Can I work with this? Right. Let me give you another example. A large German auto manufacturer is developing this tool for its dealers, not for its customers, but for its dealers. So I said, okay, what are you going to do with dealers? They say, when our dealers are selling our cars, they get questions like, hey, I'm buying this particular model of this car in this version. Will my golf bag fit in the trunk? You're like, okay, how do I know the answer to this particular question?
You cannot Google it.
You cannot Google it. You really, I mean, the model is not physically there, so you can't measure it. But ChatGPT can answer this.
That's true, yeah.
Right? Advising a startup in Silicon Valley, and this is specifically in supply chain area. You know, some of these supply chain contracts that you have with truckers, for example, and logistics companies are massive and complex, right? So I say, okay, I need to send these 8 packages from Yokohama port, and they have to be in San Francisco by next week. And by the way, they weigh so much and they have this kind of material. What's the fastest and cheapest way I can send? Okay, this is not a simple problem, right? You can do it, but it'll take a few hours to figure this out for a human being. ChatGPT can do this instantaneously. Yeah. So these are the kinds of use cases. So this is what I would call knowledge management. This is the first category of use case. The second category of big use case I'm seeing is basically programming or coding assistant. So software engineers all over the world, they're basically using this as a co-pilot. Yeah. From people that I've spoken to, researchers as well as software engineers, they tell me that if they use this particular tool to start coming up with programs, it is very, very good. It is very, very good. In some cases, they say 95% accuracy in terms of the output of
95, that's pretty high.
95, it's incredible. Even with really, really complicated kinds of programming, for example, in Python or something like this. And then, of course, their job is instead of spending 10 hours writing a code, my job is now to, in half an hour or an hour, to debug the code that this thing has written. Yeah? So significant efficiency gains in that context. So these two, knowledge management and programming co-pilot or programming assistant, I would say is 90% of the use cases I'm currently seeing. But again, we have to remember this technology is only 1.5 years old, right?
That's true. It's hard to believe it.
It's hard to believe. This is kind of like talking about the internet in 1991.
Okay.
What did we know? What we were going to do?
No smartphones, no social media.
Exactly.
Nothing,
right? So this is early days, but right now this is what I'm seeing.
So we have a kind of chart. I think this is the customer use cases. So writing at the beginning, the writing improvement is 30%. Yes. So could you go over this chart? Yeah.
So just to kind of back up a little bit when we discussed the creation of this technology was originally created to help with translation.
Yes.
Yeah. Because of that, this technology is fantastic, obviously at translation, but in general at writing. Yeah. I mean, after all, it is a next word predictor, right? It's a smart autocomplete. So think about any writing task, whether you have to compose an email. Let's say you're working for an organization and you've got a team, and once a month you have to write a newsletter for your team. Yeah, and you usually take 2-3 hours every month to write a newsletter about this has happened in my team, that has happened. Hey, today this thing can do it for you, and you can just spend maybe 15 minutes editing it, right? Creating strategy documents, creating presentation documents, creating speeches. Let's say you've got to give a speech to your team next week. All of those things, this thing is really, really good at doing. It's not going to be perfect.
Yes.
It's not going to be perfect, but it's going to give you a terrific first cut, first version, which your job is going to be to improve and build upon it. Yeah. So content creation, writing improvement, they are among the top 3 use cases. They are extremely powerful use cases because if you move beyond writing, let's say you have to create a new logo for PIVOT. This would be a great starting point.
True.
It could give you a dozen options and then you could say this, that, and can you modify this, that, something like this. We are now seeing tools being developed to create audio and video clips just from word inputs. So I give it a word-based input, just a text input saying, can you create a scene that is set in the Shibuya crossing at night with a person wearing this kinds of clothes? And boom, it will create an HD quality video of that particular thing, which is incredibly powerful.
Yes.
Right? Incredibly powerful. So I would say writing improvement, content creation is incredibly powerful use cases. I would still put this under the knowledge management kind of a category. Yeah?
Okay.
I would still put this because at the end of the day, what are you doing? If I'm creating a newsletter, what am I doing? I'm putting in all my old newsletters so it understands what my newsletter looks like. And I'm saying, can you create me something like this? Yeah. So it's kind of combining my previous knowledge and giving me an output. That's how I'm seeing
Interesting.
this.
That makes real sense because, when I use ChatGPT, it just feels like a personal writing assistant.
Right.
But when you put it as a knowledge-based infrastructure, it kind of gives a different notion for me. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and that's a great point that you make because I've often heard people say, hey, think of this as a smart intern. So this is not an expert. This is like a teenage kid, like a 14, 15, 16-year-old kid who's smart, but who's an intern. There's your intern. You tell the intern, hey, go, sometimes you tell, go make photocopies, but sometimes you say, hey, can you go, create this logo for me, just do something, or can you create this piece of music for me, or can you create this write-up for me, and then you check it and then you do it. Kind of like that. Yeah.
How about cases in Europe? Do you see any interesting cases?
Yeah, so there were some really interesting use cases with executives that I was working with, the companies that I was working with in Europe. Let me share one with you. And this is actually, I would still say it's kind of knowledge management, but I think the use case was really cool in my mind. Yeah, so this is a pharma company. And, actually every company on the planet, you have a list of customers and we send emails to them. We send kind of promotions to them all the time. Every company on the planet does this. Yeah. Now with pharma companies, they were sending promotional material to doctors and hospitals and healthcare. Oh, this is a pharma company. Now because it's a pharma company, they were also sending physical email samples. Samples, right? Pharma company gives samples to doctors and hospitals, right? Now, every email campaign on the planet, yeah, you send 1,000 emails, a certain percentage is going to bounce back everywhere in the world.
True.
People move, addresses change, something is wrong somewhere. For this company, this was a serious problem because they were sending about 350,000 mails every few months, like most companies do. They had 10 to 12% bounce back, which is again common, but for them it was also physical mail and samples. So first of all, physical mail costs money. Samples come back, samples are also useless, right? So it's a double cost for them. So here's what they did. They took the addresses that had bounced back. By the way, 10 to 12% of 350,000, that's about 40,000 bounce backs every few months. That's a lot of bounce backs.
Yes.
So they took these 40,000 addresses. They wrote, their data team, they wrote a special Python program. Then they took this Python program and the 40,000 addresses and they put it into ChatGPT. Within minutes, ChatGPT was able to find the updated addresses of all 40,000 of these. Yeah. So how do I know those are correct? Because they can also be wrong, right? They actually cross-checked those and 70 to 80% of them were actually accurate. To my mind, this is just an incredible use case because think about it, right? I mean, one person working full-time, how many addresses do you think you can cross-check in 1 hour? 5, 10 maybe if you're really efficient. It's a pain. It's a serious pain, right? So if you say 10 addresses per hour in 1 year, I mean, if you say 2,000 hours in 1 year, working hours, 1 year, one person can cross-check 20,000 addresses. 40,000 addresses will need 2 full-time people working 1 year. This thing did it in minutes. It's an amazing use case in my mind. I love this use case. Yeah, and there's another one. This is also in the medical industry, not pharma, and this was relatively recent. This was just a few months ago. So researchers at Caltech, in the United States, California, they used generative AI along with their own knowledge to create a completely new design for a catheter. When some people, unfortunately, are admitted to a hospital, they have to get tubes put in and all the things for urine and blood and stuff like this. And unfortunately, if that happens to you, your chance of infection is actually much higher. This is an unfortunate truth in every hospital on the planet, right? This is because in the tubes, even if it's sterilized, bacteria and virus can go into it. They designed a new design tube, which can be 3D printed using generative AI, that reduces the bacteria that go into your blood by 100x. 100 times fewer bacteria will get into your blood. I mean, think of the value of so it's still getting developed and tested. But my understanding, very limited understanding, I admit, is again, knowledge management. It took designs that were previously created. And then, of course, there were very expert scientists working.
So very rich data.
Very rich data. And I think that kind of is a great segue into this, which is that rich own data becomes a crucial starting point for knowledge management.
And all companies have rich data. It's very different from just a random blog post on the internet. So every company has their own rich data. So that'll be the strength.
It should be. It should be, right? I agree with you. Most companies have very, very rich amount of data that they have. The real question is, how much of that data is organized? How much of that data is clean? How much of it is accessible? Let me give you an example, right? I was working with a very large retailer. And this is a massive retailer. They're in Asia. I don't know if they're in Japan, but they're in East Asia. And I was talking to the CIO of this retailer, and they said, we have data from 300 million customers. I said, that's incredible. That's incredible. 300 million customers, right? I said, can you show me this data? They said, well, the purchase data is on this system and the loyalty data is on this system. And I said, well, you have data on 0 customers. Let's face it, and that's the problem with companies.
True.
They always have lots of data. Is the data accessible? Is it clean? Is it formatted? Because if it is not, it's going to be very hard to use this technology to make. Look, this technology is not a magic wand. Okay? It's a brilliant tool. But remember, it's a tool. If we don't know how to use the tool, or if we don't have the right situation to use the tool, it will fail.
True.
Right? You cannot just throw this technology and like magic. It's not going to happen.
Right.
Right?
So I think the first step for Japanese companies who are watching this video to look over their data, maybe clean some data and figure out and organize it.
Yeah. I love saying that the companies that are going to win using this technology are going to be the companies that do the boring things right.
Okay.
Yeah? Don't worry about the sexy things.
Okay.
Yeah, forget the sexy things. It's very
important, but
exciting.
Okay. Exciting.
It's very exciting.
Because when we hear about AI, it's very sexy, very high tech.
You want to create an app. You want to create your own AI model. Very cool. That's not how you make money.
Okay.
That's not. So yeah, if you're OpenAI, if you're Google, go ahead for sure. Do it, right? Most of us are not Google or Amazon or Facebook. Most of us are regular companies.
Yes.
You're trying to figure it out.
We have to admit it. Yes.
Right? Do the boring things right. Do it the old-fashioned way. Don't fall for the hype. What problem am I solving? Basic question. Lots of companies don't know this. Do I have data? Where do I find it? Again, nobody gets excited about data cleaning and data architecture. Oh, this is 1990 stuff. Yeah, it is 1990 stuff. You should have done it in 1990. Most companies haven't done it even today, right? Does your data talk to each other? Do you have the infrastructure and governance so that this doesn't mess up or you don't get fined? In Europe, there's GDPR. In Japan, you have your own laws.
Yes.
Right? None of this is exciting stuff, right? But this is what you need to have in place in order to really leverage this particular technology. Because once you do this, yes, then you can do all the cool stuff, and then you can build models and sexy things and do this thing. But please make sure this is in place first.
And so you're saying that you had to build a corpus.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. You have to figure out what part of your internal data is most valuable, most useful for this, based on the problem that you're going to solve. Is that internal corpus clean? That corpus is going to be combined of structured and unstructured data. Unstructured data is going to be especially messy. Things like memos, PDFs. Some companies I'm working with, they have handwritten invoices because that's just how their business works. So they have to figure out a way, using OCR, optical character recognition, to digitize those before they get. Yeah, but this is all painful, boring stuff that you have to do before you get to do the cool stuff. Right? So this is the price that you have to pay for entry into the cool stuff. But once you do this, then you can get good output.
Could you give us some advice on how you can find out what data is valuable or not? Because in companies, you have even paper documents, like files and
massive amounts
Massive
of data,
amount.
right? Most companies today, the problem is too much data,
Too much data.
little data. I always advise companies to go back to the basics, start with the problem. So my two pieces of advice are, one I've already said, please start with a very, very clearly, objectively defined problem. So don't say, my problem is I want to improve the motivation of employees. How do you measure motivation? Which employees? By what time? I mean, this is so vague. It's so ambiguous. Maybe you state the problem saying, okay, for this particular product line of mine, I'm going to improve the NPS, the Net Promoter Score, from 50 to 60 by 1st of November. Okay, now that's a clearly stated problem for me. That's an objectively, clearly stated. For this particular problem, what data do I need? Minimum data. And this is where quality data scientist, this is where she can help you. You state a very, very clear problem. You go to your data scientist. Your data scientist should be able to tell you, in order to address this particular issue, I need this much of this type of data. Okay? So maybe you've got 50 million data points, but they're dirty. I don't need 50 million to get started. I need 1 million to get started.
Okay.
To get started. But I need 1 million of this, this, and this. If you can give that to me in the next few weeks, I can get started. It will not be a 100% perfect solution. Okay? But it will improve over time.
True.
So this is a marathon. This is not a sprint. So these are the two things you need to look at when you're looking at your data. The problem statement and the bare minimum required to get started.
Interesting. So you're saying that you have to start with a question rather than go over a bunch of data and just figuring out which is valuable or not.
Look, the second the second method, which is I dive into data and I figure out the problem from data, it is possible. That's the cool technique of doing it, right? That's always fun. Man, look what I did. Leave that to the Googles of the world. Facebook is brilliant at doing that. Most of us are not.
True.
So more formally, if your analytics maturity is very high in an organization, you can pull that off. If it is not, you're going to get trapped in a circle where you're just looking at data and you're looking at more data and doing analysis without solving a problem. The old-fashioned boring way, it works for everyone. That's why I always say start with a problem.
Do you think that traditional companies have kind of advantage because they're old, so they have tons of data? Do you think?
They do. As long as they do the boring, they make sure that the data management, the data cleaning, the data governance is in place. And that's one thing, what's known as technical debt. That's one place where traditional companies may suffer, but this would be the right time to kind of invest in those things and make sure that's in place.
Okay. Yeah. What do you think, there are costs and potential drawbacks, and, should we advocate for strict regulation or laissez-faire approach, leave it as it is, or what's your opinion or take on this?
EU has something, but the rest of the world does not. But how do companies regulate it? That's a huge issue. Yeah. How do you have a balanced regulation so that people don't do anything stupid, but at the same time you're not killing innovation? And look, we will never get this balance, but can you come close to this is the real question we have to solve.
Do you think, what will be the future of generative AI? What kind of innovation it will?
Once the hype starts dying down, hopefully soon, then companies will hopefully get into, okay, let's think about how we can apply it to make money. How can we apply it to add value? How can we apply it to make the lives of people better? And that's where the real cool use cases, the equivalence of the Googles of ChatGPT, the Uber of ChatGPT, the Airbnb of ChatGPT, the Amazon of ChatGPT, that's where hopefully these will start coming up.